Imagine a sitting European parliamentarian, right, being banned from a Western country simply for quoting a Bible verse.
It sounds like fiction, honestly.
It really does. But on the exact same day, you have this decentralized network of Catholic priests in Indonesia basically running laps around their own national government in earthquake relief.
Yeah, the contrast is just wild.
It is. And well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a huge stack of global reports covering mid-August 2026. But the mission today, for you listening, is not to just rattle off a standard news recap.
Right, there are plenty of places you can get just the headlines.
Exactly. We are examining these political developments, the crime reports, and these human interest stories through a very specific lens today. We're looking at Christian theology, ethics, and scripture.
Because to understand the global church in 2026, I mean, you really have to look at an institution navigating extreme, just wildly polarized realities. You have communities facing these existential physical threats on a daily basis, yet literally at the exact same time, you have ecclesiastical leadership drafting the moral parameters for global artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and operating like some of the most sophisticated disaster relief networks on the planet.
Exactly.
It is a dizzying dichotomy. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Let's start by looking at the physical threats, because the reports coming out of the global south are, they are incredibly heavy.
They are. It's a tough reality to face.
It really is. In Nigeria, the Middle Belt has become this absolute epicenter for lethal anti-Christian violence. We are looking at armed Fulani militias deliberately targeting Christian agricultural communities.
And this is across Plateau, Kaduna, and Nasarawa states.
Right. The late July and early August attacks are just devastating. In the village of Naradon, a massacre occurred just before midnight where 30 Christians were killed.
30 people.
Yeah, and these were members of both the Catholic Church and ECWA, which is the evangelical church winning all. It's one of the largest Protestant denominations in Nigeria.
And we have to highlight the most tragic part of that report.
Yeah, 11 of them were children.
Just horrific.
And it's not just random attacks. They're executing targeted assassinations of local leadership, too, like the ambush of youth organizer Philibus Usman Kuje.
What's fascinating here, well, fascinating in a dark way, is that the underlying mechanism of these attacks goes way beyond the standard media narrative.
The whole farmer-herder clashes over resources thing.
Exactly. When you actually analyze the demographic breakdown of the casualties, the deliberate targeting of infants and the assassinations of youth leaders like Kuje, it reveals a highly systematic campaign.
Yeah, it's not just a dispute over land.
No, the objective is demographic replacement. It is designed to literally eradicate future generations and permanently fracture the social cohesion of these Christian communities.
And this is playing out against a backdrop of, profound, arguably complicit state negligence.
That's the real kicker.
It's a recurring theme in these sources. The local security forces in these Nigerian states consistently arrive hours after an attack is concluded.
Despite having early warnings.
Right. And you see the exact same dynamic in Egypt. The August reports detail extremist crowds firebombing Coptic Christian homes in Minya.
Yeah.
And the local police had advanced warning of the mob gathering, and, well, they simply failed to intervene.
Which, brings a completely different type of state suppression into focus when you look at what is happening simultaneously in China.
The contrast is crazy. It's like the Book of Acts, facing the visceral violence of the mob in one region and the bureaucratic suppression of the magistrate in another.
Exactly. So while believers in Nigeria and Egypt face the mob, believers in China face this cold, bureaucratic machinery of the state. The sources highlight the August 5th detention of Pastor David Tang.
In Wenzhou.
Yes, Wenzhou, a city historically known as China's Jerusalem.
But the Chinese state security, they didn't arrest him for preaching a sermon, did they? Or for distributing Bibles?
No, they didn't. They charged him with fraud.
Fraud, let's break that down because
Right.
it's so insidious.
The Chinese Communist Party has brilliantly, and I say brilliantly in a completely ruthless way, they've reclassified normative religious administration as financial crime.
Right. So Pastor Tang was running an unregistered house church.
Yes, and under this legal framework, if a congregation collects voluntary tithes outside the state-sanctioned church structure, the state just categorizes it as an illegal fundraising scheme.
Kovad.
Exactly. And if a pastor delivers an unauthorized message, it is categorized as subversion. It's this highly structured method designed to financially and legally paralyze independent Christian networks.
All without creating traditional religious martyrs.
Precisely. You don't get the optics of jailing someone for their faith. You're just jailing a white-collar criminal.
So I struggle with how that squares with the theological response we're seeing, right?
Yeah.
If state structures are either failing to protect Christians from being murdered or actively weaponizing financial law to call their theology fraud,
Yeah.
how does the biblical concept of trusting God's ultimate justice intersect with the immediate demand for international accountability?
That's a huge question.
Because the sources mention groups like the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom demanding geopolitical action. Doesn't the demand for earthly justice sort of conflict with the theology of just trusting divine judgment?
I mean, that is the defining theological tension of the persecuted church. The historical synthesis lies in the Apostle Paul's theology of the body of Christ.
Okay.
Paul writes that if one part of the body suffers, every part suffers with it. The localized pain of a believer whose home is firebombed in Minya or a pastor jailed in Wenzhou, it's not just their isolated burden.
Right, it belongs to everybody.
Exactly. It necessitates a unified global witness. Trusting in divine justice does not give the global church, or the international community for that matter, a pass to ignore oppression in the present.
So it's both.
Right. Christian ethics basically mandate advocating for the vulnerable as a direct expression of faith. Secular mechanisms like U.S. CIRF reports actually align perfectly with the biblical mandate to expose darkness and seek justice for the defenseless.
That makes a lot of sense. But, while believers in the global south face the physical sword, believers in the West are increasingly facing the gavel.
That is a great way to put it.
While China uses the guise of financial fraud to lock the church out of the physical public square, Western bureaucracies are using immigration and hate speech laws to lock it out of the ideological one.
Yeah.
Take what just happened to Finnish Member of Parliament, Päivi Räsänen, and Lutheran Bishop Juhana Pohjola. Now, we want to be clear here. We are not taking a political side on this.
Right, we're just purely examining how secular legal frameworks are colliding with Orthodox theology based on the reports.
Exactly. So Räsänen and Pohjola were penalized under a section of the Finnish Criminal Code covering, get this, war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Which sounds extreme.
It does. And their offense was a 2004 church pamphlet outlining traditional Christian teachings on marriage. But the fallout just escalated dramatically in these August reports.
The UK visa issue, right?
Yes. In July 2026, the UK Home Office revoked Räsänen's electronic travel authorization. They literally labeled her presence not conducive to the public good.
Wow.
And they banned a sitting European parliamentarian from attending a religious liberty conference in Belfast.
Applying the not conducive to the public good standard here is, well, it's a stunning expansion of Western immigration policy.
Because what is that usually used for?
Historically, that legal mechanism has been reserved for blocking individuals associated with national security threats, terror cells, or those inciting severe public disorder.
Right.
So to weaponize it against a politician based solely on her peaceful articulation of Orthodox Christian theology, it indicates a rapid ideological quarantining of historical Christianity in Europe.
So what does this all mean? There's a deep scriptural tension here. Romans 13 clearly calls for Christians to submit to governing authorities.
Right. But how does the modern church navigate that mandate when foundational theology is retroactively criminalized as hate speech? If a pamphlet from 2004 is a crime against humanity today, submission to the state becomes incredibly complicated. It does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the historical Christian consensus has always been that submission to authority abruptly ends the moment that authority requires disobedience to God.
Yeah, the classic, we must obey God rather than men stance.
Exactly. But the modern secularization of the West makes this friction systemic, not just localized to a few courtrooms. The Observatory on Intolerance and Discrimination Against Christians in Europe, they reported 2,444 hate crimes against Christians over the preceding year.
Over 2,000. That is wild.
It really highlights a broader societal drift demanding that Christianity fundamentally alter its tenets to remain culturally palatable.
The sources cite the YMCA as a prime historical example of this drift, actually.
Oh, yeah, and it's such a good example. The Young Men's Christian Association was founded explicitly to promote evangelical religion and spiritual growth among young men in urban environments.
Right, I think a lot of people forget the C stands for Christian.
Exactly. But over decades, society pressured the institution to dilute its exclusive theological claims in exchange for cultural acceptance. It eventually traded orthodox theology for a secularized gospel of basically physical health and social utility.
So it became just a gym and a community center.
Right. And what we are seeing now with Päivi Räsänen in Finland and the UK is the legal enforcement of that exact same societal demand.
Dilute your theology, or else.
Yeah. Dilute your theology or you will be systematically excluded from the public square and potentially even barred from crossing international borders.
Think about that for a second. For you listening, the cultural pressure you might feel at your workplace, right?
Right.
To keep your faith quiet or to nod along with something you fundamentally disagree with.
Oh, absolutely.
That is the exact same mechanism, just on a micro scale, as a national government revoking a travel visa over a theological pamphlet. It paints a picture of a faith that is being pushed entirely into a defensive posture.
It really does sound like a retreat.
It does. But then you look at who is actually shaping the moral parameters of our future tech landscape, and the narrative completely flips. It would be easy to assume the church is just playing defense, but they aren't.
No, they are heavily on the offensive in the ethics space.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at what the Vatican announced on August 11th regarding the 2027 World Day of Peace.
So the theme they selected is disarming technology, serving peace.
Which is such a powerful phrase.
It really is. And it accompanies a major encyclical released by Pope Leo XIV titled Magnifica Humanitas, which explicitly declares that no algorithm can make war morally acceptable.
Wow. It is a sweeping push into biodigital ethics, and it's not just the Catholic Church either.
Right, Protestant groups are heavily involved too.
Exactly. The sources highlight Protestant and evangelical efforts stepping into this space. You have the platform FaithGPT publishing massive ethical analyses on things like Spotify's new AI personas.
And the Unbelievable podcast.
Yes, the Unbelievable podcast hosting these heavy debates on cosmological fine-tuning, which, for those unfamiliar, is the idea that the universe's physical laws are so incredibly precise that they point mathematically to a creator.
It challenges the whole narrative of a purely material universe.
Right. It's like humanity is trying to build this digital Tower of Babel, and the church is stepping in as the architect's conscience, reminding us of the imago Dei, the image of God.
The church stepping in as the conscience is a great analogy because the unconstrained militarization of artificial intelligence represents a profound technological hubris.
It really does.
At the core of the Christian critique is that theology of the imago Dei, the belief that human beings are made in the image of God and therefore possess unique intrinsic dignity. And from that flows the concept of relational agency, which argues that our moral decisions, especially life and death ones, fundamentally require human empathy, connection, and accountability.
Wait, let's play devil's advocate for a second. Look at it from the perspective of a secular military strategist.
Okay.
Human soldiers get tired, right? They get scared, they panic, and they commit war crimes because of those emotions. Couldn't you argue the exact opposite of the Vatican?
How so?
Couldn't an AI be programmed to be perfectly objective, strictly following the rules of engagement without anger or prejudice, and thereby actually saving civilian lives? I mean, why wouldn't we want an algorithm handling the chaos of war?
I mean, that is the exact utilitarian argument being made by defense contractors right now.
Exactly.
But the flaw in that thinking, from a theological perspective, is that when you delegate lethal military decisions to an autonomous weapon system, you strip warfare of its last remaining humanitarian constraints.
The human element.
Right. An algorithm cannot exercise mercy. It can calculate data, sure, but it cannot comprehend the moral weight or the proportionality of taking a human life. It has no soul to bear the burden of its actions.
Wow. That's a haunting way to put it.
Pope Leo XIV is basically arguing that transferring the power of life and death from human moral agents to mathematics is a supreme violation of human dignity. It turns humans into mere data points to be processed and, well, deleted.
And the Vatican is actually using its geopolitical leverage to turn this theology into international law. The sources note that in July 2026, they gathered a coalition of Nobel laureates in Rome.
Yeah, that was a huge summit.
They pushed for a global treaty explicitly banning the integration of AI into nuclear launch systems. I mean, they are leading the charge on this.
We're seeing a direct evolution of the church's historic diplomatic role here. During the Cold War, the Vatican was a massive voice for nuclear disarmament.
Wow.
And now they're pioneering this new frontier of biodigital ethics. They are proving that ancient theological principles about human dignity can successfully mobilize modern, secular scientific communities around the shared goal of human preservation.
It's incredible. But that high-level defense of human dignity isn't just theoretical, right? It becomes intensely viscerally practical the exact moment human life is threatened on the ground by disaster.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the humanitarian portion of these August reports. We are looking at a massive earthquake that hit Flores, Indonesia on August 15th.
A 7.7 magnitude quake, that is massive.
Huge. The immediate fallout was at least 47 fatalities, nearly 6,000 people displaced, and widespread infrastructure collapse across the region.
But the response was immediate. Within mere hours of the tremors stopping, Caritas Indonesia, operating under the leadership of Father Fridi Ranantaruk, initiated a massive disaster response.
Using what they call the One Church, One Response protocol. And the logistics of this are just staggering. They set up emergency medical triage tents right next to the structurally compromised Ruting Hospital.
Wow.
Yeah, and they turned parish socioeconomic development commissions into logistical hubs to run community kitchens in Maumere.
That level of coordination is incredible.
It is. So we always talk about the church being the hands and feet of Jesus, but strictly from a logistical standpoint, how does a decentralized hyperlocal parish network consistently manage to outpace and outperform state emergency services in a crisis?
It fundamentally comes down to embedded trust in pre-existing networks. Think about the mechanics of state disaster relief for a second.
Okay.
A federal emergency agency has to deploy into a disaster zone from the outside. They have to map the terrain, establish secure supply lines, and somehow build trust with a highly traumatized population while, navigating destroyed roads.
It takes days just to get oriented.
Exactly. The church, however, is already there. It is embedded. The local priest already knows exactly who the vulnerable, mobility-impaired elderly are in his parish.
Oh, that's such a good point. They don't need a map.
Right. The parishioners know the layout of the church grounds and who has construction equipment. It functions as a parallel pre-existing civic infrastructure.
And it kicks it immediately.
The swift conversion of a spiritual sanctuary into a triage center highlights a profound reality. In much of the global south, the church is the most reliable pillar of actual physical survival.
But operating at that level of crisis response, while simultaneously facing the kind of persecution we talked about in Nigeria or China, that requires massive endurance.
It really does.
And the sources indicate that this operational resilience is directly fueled by a surge in spiritual resilience. Amidst the violence, the legal battles, the natural disasters, we are seeing a massive resurgence of popular piety.
The August 15th Solemnity of the Assumption of Mary provided a major focal point for this, actually.
Yes, the pilgrimages.
We saw the historic walking pilgrimages to the Jasna Gora sanctuary in Poland. Thousands of citizens walking hundreds of miles as a physical assertion of their faith.
And the blessing of Europe's tallest statue of Mary in Konotope.
Right. It's a very physical, visible faith.
And we also saw Pope Leo XIV deliver a highly pointed message to the youth in Monterrey, Mexico. He didn't just offer spiritual platitudes. He specifically challenged them to use personal holiness as a practical, daily antidote to societal decay and cartel violence.
Yeah, that was a strong statement.
He framed faith not as an abstract idea, but as a direct weapon against the nihilism of cartel culture.
It is a highly effective strategy of cultural fortification. Whether it is a Mexican teenager actively rejecting cartel recruitment through parish involvement, or a Polish citizen asserting their Christian heritage by walking to Jasna Gora.
Always connected.
Exactly. These deeply traditional spiritual practices are the exact mechanisms that give the physical and logistical operations of the church their endurance.
When you step back and look at the sheer scope of what we've covered today, from just a few weeks in August 2026, the picture is incredibly complex.
It really is.
You have a global faith besieged by armed militants in the global south and heavily restricted by secular courts and immigration law in the west.
Yeah.
Yet simultaneously, it is leading the global ethical charge on the future of artificial intelligence and operating as an absolutely indispensable humanitarian force in the wake of natural disasters.
Given this entire landscape, there is a profound question we need to ask ourselves and something for you to mull over as you finish listening.
What's that?
Is the rapid, aggressive secularization of the West, combined with the isolating rise of autonomous technology, actually forcing the global church back to its first-century roots?
Wow.
Are we witnessing the painful death of institutional comfort, only to see the necessary rebirth of a decentralized, deeply resilient, and profoundly authentic faith.
That is the exact tension that strips away the illusion of the church being some fading historical artifact. These reports reveal it as a dynamic, deeply tested, and living organism.
Without a doubt.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive and exploring these sources with us. We really want to hear from you on this.
Yes, definitely.
How do you see these forces? The persecution, the lawfare, the tech, ethics, the humanitarian work shaping the future of faith and society. Send your thoughts, your pushbacks, or your comments directly to us at rev11.15media@gmail.com.